بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرض. First, I should congratulate you for the blessed occasion of Eid Qadir, and according to our calendar we celebrate it tonight and tomorrow. I don't know what has been declared in. Yes, so I hope that this coincidence would be, inshallah, a sign of Allah's support and guidance for us, inshallah. The issue of spirituality or akhlaq and how to make sure that we achieve what we want in this regard is very important. And what I have been trying to do in this paper is to show that this is not just having a textbook on akhlaq or spirituality. It's a whole combination of what teachers, administrators have to do, what the environment of the madrasa has to be, what methods have to be applied. Many things have to come together so that we can make sure that we achieve what we want to achieve. But before that, I have to make it clear that there are technical discussions that we can have about the difference between akhlaq and spirituality and tazkiyah, but for the time being I use them interchangeably, so I don't want to that much distinguish between them right now. I have started the paper with some of the challenges that we have in our madaris with respect to akhlaq, and I don't want to mention them because time is very limited, but basically what we can say is that we see we don't achieve that much when it comes to moral side of it or a spiritual side of it, and we have some elements or some factors that work against us, and already many papers have touched about this issue, and that applies here as well. I'd rather talk about some opportunities instead of always talking about some challenges. I think we have very good opportunities to work on a spiritual progress in our madaris. One is that although it is true that we don't have any way to make sure that the people come to madrasa, but on the other hand, this is a positive point that those who are there, they are not forced to be there. At least the parents who bring their children there, they bring it with joy and with really hope that madrasa can help in having better children. It's not that they must by law or some other forces bring their children there. So this is very important. And also another important thing is that in our madaris, alhamdulillah, normally we have dedicated teachers. Most of them are teaching on a voluntary basis. It's true that they have problem with qualifications, but on the other hand, it's good that they want to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They want to serve the community. They love children. Sometimes in other schools, they are just there because this is the way they are paid. So this is another opportunity that we have. We shouldn't underestimate this. The other thing is that in madaris, we have some freedom that we may not have in the schools, because we don't need to follow any strictly defined curriculum. If we feel that we have to spend 60%, 70% of time, for example, on akhlaq, we can do that. If we want to spend more on aqaid, we can do that. Just It's between us and Allah and the real interest of the community. We don't need to get permission from any government or from any educational authority. So this is another advantage. The other thing is that normally in Madaris we have a kind of homogeneous environment. Most of the time the children are all from the same faith background, even denominationally normally they are the same. In schools we don't have such opportunity. So they are all Muslims, and maybe more than 90% they are all Shia. So this makes life very easy, because then you don't need to say, okay, if I say something about Islam, then there is a Christian, there is a Hindu in the school. But if you want to talk about, for example, Imam Ali, then maybe there are some Salafis here, for example, or other people. So this is also another advantage that we have in Madresa. The other advantage that we have is that normally our madrasas are connected to resident alims of the community, not always, but in many cases, and to the mosque or a mambara. And this is a good point. It's not that it's either, for example, just governmental, or some few people have established a private school. There is a close connection always between madrasa and community and the religious, I can say, people of the community. Another thing is that although having restricted time is a challenge, but on the other hand, I think it's an opportunity. Because if you want to, for example, invite an alim or a very good, for example, member of community to teach in the school, it's very difficult. Because that is where he has other commitments. He has to go for work from Monday to Friday. But Saturday, Sunday, normally they are free. So we should use this to bring the best members of the community to Madresa. So this is another opportunity. And also because the time is limited, he doesn't need to commit himself for long hours for many days. He can come just for 3 hours for the whole week, or maybe even 1 hour. So it's important to raise our expectations when we want to bring people in, and go for every good person, every qualified, every pious person in the community, and bring them into madrasa. This is something that you can do in madrasa, but you cannot necessarily do it in other places. And there are some other things I skip. So I think we have good opportunities here. So now, taking into account 3 things. One is the goal of having madrasa, which is to help our next generation to develop Islamically. And this is very important. We have to realize we can just help. Even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam cannot make sure that people would be guided. He can just deliver the message. Even someone like Prophet Nuh, with all the qualities that he had, with all the patience he had, he managed to convert as an average 1 person in every 12 years. So we cannot do miracles. And if we see there are problems, we shouldn't always doubt about what we have been doing and change everything because there are problems. Sometimes maybe what we have been doing is not wrong. It is our limit. We cannot force people to be good. We cannot expect everyone to accept. So we help our youngsters, our kids and children to develop Islamically from every aspect. There is no time to mention that how beautifully these disciplines that sometimes they think we think they are disconnected, like akhlaq, aqaid, fiqh, tarikh. I think they all are very nicely interconnected. We have to make sure that a child who comes to madrasa is mentally convinced and practically he has good actions, and in his heart he's a good person. So this is what we want to achieve in madrasa. We don't want just to pass on some information and data. We want to make sure that they understand, they are convinced, and they decide to become a good person, as far as we can, of course, help. And with the consideration of the challenges and the opportunities that we said, so now I suggest to work on these areas. One is environment. The environment of madrasa is very important. Even if we were really perfectionist, we should have used our intelligence, our experiences to come up with a special design or architecture for madrasas, the way Muslims have been doing for building mosques, building schools in the past. Everything is really thought through. When they built, these Hawza Ilmiya buildings, it's nothing just happened by chance. Even lighting is important. The way everything is built as a kind of circle, it's important. You don't have, corridors. We have a, experience in Qom. There was a very huge hawza for ladies, and the person who was in charge, he said this building, which was not traditional building, he said it's spiritually very destructive, because it was like hotels, rooms facing each other in a dark corridor, and the person who wants to supervise would not be able to supervise. But in traditional setting, if the principal, the head of Hawza, stands in every corner of the school, he can see everything. He can see who is visiting whom, who is wasting his time, who is doing what. Everything can be monitored. Everything is very nicely planned by our previous engineers and architects. So we need a really good venue. Unfortunately, many times we struggle for finding good locations. We have to sometimes have it just in mosques or some houses or some schools for a temporary time. They give you just on the same day. You don't have any opportunity to prepare that much. But still, we have to make sure that we improve the condition as much as possible. We cannot talk about Islam's emphasis on cleanliness and then have our madrasa in a dirty, venue. We cannot talk about, for example, Islam's emphasis on being organized, and then everything is put, in a very unorganized way in the school or madrasa or building. What we say and what they see must be in harmony with each other. So the space is very important. Another thing is that there must be harmony between teachers among each other, teachers and administrators, and teachers and parents. If the teacher of akhlaq has problem with the teacher of aqaid, for example, or the principal, and students know that these people don't like each other, they speak against each other, they don't want to cooperate with each other, then everything we say about akhlaq would be not considered by them seriously. Or if someone says this is the main thing in Islam, another person says no, that is the main thing in Islam. If we give them conflicting messages, either in our words or in our practice, they would be confused, and sometimes they take advantage of using one view against the other and end up with doing nothing. Like in a family, if there is no consensus between father and mother, then the children may get confused or use one of them against the other. So this harmony is very important. The teachers and administrators should be good role models. This is much more than just having a textbook. They should be good role models. We should not compromise about the moral character of the teachers. If they are not good role models, then everything else would be damaged. There was a very famous teacher in Tehran, the late Ruzbeh, and he had studies in the Hose, then he did some studies in physics, but then he dedicated his life to being a teacher in one of the Islamic schools in Tehran. And one of the things he used to say was, our students would not become what we tell them to be. They would become what we are ourselves. So the effect of behavior is much more than the effect of the words. So the teachers should be good role models. Another aspect of this harmony is that the teachers of different subjects should be aware of the way spiritual lessons are given. I have put down some details, for example, how they should submit weekly, monthly lesson plans and integrate the spiritual message that we want to give them. So even if we are talking about ahkam, about, for example, aqaid, they should know that now our focus in a spiritual direction of the school is what? And they should integrate that into their message. Indirectly, they can touch upon this. Another thing is that administrators and teachers must keep track of what is going on in the school among students. Sometimes in the classroom, but many times outside classroom, and also outside Madresa. They should be aware of what their students do outside. Maybe they make appointments here and then outside the school they go and do mischief. We have to be aware of that. We have to have some eye on them. We should also keep up with latest trends and developments, the things that may be of interest to students. Maybe, for example, I don't realize that now my students are, God forbid, for example, dealing with a new immoral action. And by the time, if I am not, alert, by the time I realize it will be too late. We have to be always alert and careful to find out if there is any moral problem happening or anything that can be destructive. Another thing is that we should be able to have teachers and staff who are very friendly with the students. Unfortunately, sometimes some religious people, they don't know that what is the difference between being strong in your faith and being a soft person. They think if you are strong, you have to be harsh. But what we have in Islam is quite opposite. And I always say, I wish this sentence could be made as a, inscript in front of our eyes in all our, mosques and centers. When Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says in Khutbah Muttaqeen, فَمِنْ عَلَامَةَ أَحَدِهِمْ أَنَّكَ تَرَى لَهُ قُوَّةً فِي دِينٍ وَحَزْمًا فِي لِينٍ. Among the signs of the pious are that they are strong in their religion, but at the same time they plan for future, but they are also soft. Having these three together, I think, make miracles. To be a strong in Iman, but at the same time to be a soft person and be far-sighted. Normally religious people are not far-sighted because they say we do tawakkul. Or they are not soft. If they are soft, they become too liberal. To be a strong, to have your principles, at the same time be a soft person, a gentle person, like Rasulullah. Allah says, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لَنْتَ لَهُمْ. You have become a soft person. No one can say the Prophet was, na'udhu billah, liberal. He was not liberal, but he was a soft person. And to understand this softness of the Prophet, we have to compare it with what Allah says to Prophet Musa, ala nabiyyina wa alayhi salam. I don't want to underestimate the personality of Prophet Musa, alayhi salam, but I just want to make a comparison. When it comes to Prophet Musa and Prophet Harun, Allah says to them, قُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيَّنًا. Speak to Pharaoh with soft language. This is a command, and it's about language. When it comes to the Prophet Muhammad, Allah says, لَنْتَ لَهُمْ. This is not a command, it's a statement. It means Allah confirms that it has been achieved. And that was about قَوْلًا لَيَّنًا, but this is لَنْتَ لَهُمْ. Your entire character is this. The big difference between speaking softly and being entirely a soft person. So, Amir al-Mu'minin says that you have to be strong in your faith, but at the same time soft and hazm. See the future and plan for future. So, our teachers must have these characters. They should not be people who are very rigid and harsh so that students wouldn't dare to talk to them, or to be too liberal so that they confuse the children. Another thing is that the administrators should always try to encourage teachers and find for them some means to increase their knowledge of akhlaq and spirituality, and if possible to arrange for them meetings and visits that can help them in this regard. Because if someone, his hand is empty, how can he help other people? If I am drained, I need to be recharged. So if a person is giving akhlaq lessons and is, in charge of spiritual, education of the school, we should help that person to visit ulama, to discuss with them akhlaq issues, give them some time to read and study, so that he always remains fresh. Another thing is that we should have always sessions among the teachers and administrators to remind ourselves of our intention, why we are doing all this. Because unfortunately sometimes we get used to the things and then it becomes a routine and we do them without knowing why we are doing them. Sometimes even we say to ourselves in Hose that we normally go to Hose with pure intention for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if we are not careful, we become so much busy with our studies that we may forget why we have gone there. My study becomes the main thing for me. So this is important that we always have meetings and remind ourselves what is our intention. If intention is always kept pure and for the sake of Allah, then for sure Allah would support us. So this is the second area. The third area that my paper addresses is about some programs that we can have for improving our spirituality. One is some programs that we should have for occasions. These are very important. They may not be in the text, in the curriculum, but for example, we have Eid al-Ghadir, we have Eid al-Qurban, we have Eid al-Fitr, or we have demise anniversaries of the Prophet and Imams. Any occasion that can be used as an excuse to educate them, and more than just education, also to make them feel the connection with the great personalities, our role models, to connect to the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, is not to be missed. We must not miss these opportunities. We must not say, we are busy, we have only 3 hours, and we cannot address these issues. Sometimes they learn through these things much more. And one of the ways that some of the great reformers were successful in our history is that they were very much trying to use these opportunities, whether it's happy occasions or sad occasions, to increase the level of awareness of the Shiite community or Muslim community. And when I say this, I don't mean just by do some decoration or just read some nasheeds. I mean something that also has some content, some depth into it. Maybe inviting someone to give a short lecture, maybe asking them to write papers and have a quiz or competition, maybe have book reading. For example, we say now we have Eid al-Fitr, so we want everyone to study this book and come and have, for example, presentation. So I'm not just saying just read some nasheed and give some sweets and then finish. It's much more than that. Another thing is that we should try to have some topics as our priority. The sister Razia, for example, mentioned that every year they have a topic, a theme that they, for example, focus on that. Maybe 1 year, one topic is good for the whole school, but I think it can also be broken down to shorter periods. For example, every 1 month, every 2 months, every 3 months, we can have one moral characteristic and focus on that. Another thing that we can do is to benefit from Salatul Jama'ah, or for example assembly for prayer, for some du'as. These are the things which are very important. And if there can be also occasional trips, it's very important for spirituality. Either we take them to holy places, or even we take them, for example, just to another town or outside the town, but we try to bring our theoretical lessons into practice. For example, to show how they should work together, how they should divide the task, how should they support each other, how they should be friendly, how they should be kind with each other. So this is another area of the paper. The next area, the fourth area, is about methods. What methods we have to adopt in our Madresa education, which can help with the spirituality. So we have to keep up with the latest research on best practices. So the one who is teaching akhlaq or spirituality must not say, no, for this topic I don't need to know the best method. He has to be aware of the best methods of teaching, especially teachings such topics, because every topic has its own also particularities. We have to encourage students to practice different aspects of akhlaq and self-purification. This is very important. If we can make a plan in advance that how can I engage the students and how can I make them first understand what does purity of soul, for example, mean for a person in this age, in this particular context, and then try to design some actions that can help them to practice that. Sometimes maybe you artificially create opportunities in the classroom to see who is going to help another person, who is ready to sacrifice for another person. So there are many things that we can plan so that they get opportunities to practice what we tell them. The other thing is about discussing with the students how to implement Islamic values in the public sphere. Because they are not going to be in the school or madrasa forever. They go to family, they meet someone on the street, they go to university, they go to workplaces. So we have to help them understand how can they implement Islamic values in different contexts. So sometimes, for example, you can bring a scenario into the classroom and say, suppose you are a person who works in an office and your salary is not enough and someone has a problem and wants to give you some money as a gift. What would you do? So we have to make it something applicable to their life. Another thing is that we should always be in consultation with experts in Islamic studies and especially Islamic spirituality. So every madrasa must either have an expert or be at least in consultation with some expert in this field. Especially this is very delicate issue, and in some areas you can say this is even more dangerous than many other areas, because if you overdo it, then there's a possibility of confusion. And I think sometimes we have really been harmed, and I'm sure you have in your mind examples how people who were interested in spirituality, because they didn't have good guidance, they were confused and then they started confusing others. Another area is about subjects. Ideally, we must have textbooks which are very carefully planned and address different aspects of spirituality in the way that everything makes sense, everything is interconnected, and priorities are taken into account. This is very important. Most of our books, unfortunately, just brings things without connection. They give you a list of, for example, good qualities and bad qualities. But which one is the most important? Which one brings the others? Which one is the one that you must not sacrifice even if there is conflict with another value? Sometimes two values conflict with each other. Indeed, I believe one of the basic requirements of any moral system is to be able to show what you have to do when you have conflict of the values. Which value is more important? So, hopefully we should have such texts. But even if we don't have such texts, still there are good resources and materials that can be used and made available to the teachers. And I have given a list of some of the materials that I think would be useful for the teachers and for the madrasa. And I think there are some qualities that, in my understanding, are the most important ones, and either in the book or if there is no book, in our planning we should consider these values. I mention quickly few qualities that I think are the most important ones. One thing that I think is very important in Islamic spirituality, maybe some of you would be surprised to hear this from me, but I think this is very important, is rationality. I think a sign of healthy progress in spirituality is that you are more intellectual, more rational than a person who is not spiritual. We want people who are ulul albab, people who are not driven just by emotions, people who do not accept things without reason or reject things without reason. We need people who are critical and rational. It's just enough to refer to the hadith of Imam Kazim alayhi salam to Hisham ibn Hakam in the beginning of Al-Kafi, such a masterpiece about the significance of aql in Islam. So we need people who graduate from our madrasas and they are thinkers, they are rational people. Another quality which is very important is that they must be concerned with justice. I think a very important aspect of Islamic spirituality is to be concerned with the rights rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rights of yourself over yourself. We shouldn't do zulm to ourselves. If I have potentials and I don't cultivate them, then I'm doing zulm to myself. If I commit sins, if I disobey Allah, I'm doing zulm to myself. And if I do injustice to other people. But sometimes you say, people, don't do these things, these are wrong, you are doing zulm to other people. But I think we have to establish this characteristic of justice in the personality of the people. This is very important. Especially, in the school of Ahlul Bayt, how justice has become so important that for everything significant, we say the condition is adala. Imam of the mosque, Imam al-Jum'ah, narrator of hadith, judge, mujtahid, leader, everyone has to be just. This justice is very important, and it is not just interpersonal. It is also within the person. Another quality which is very important is to be able to act as a member of a team. I don't have time to explain that how this is connected to the concept of wilaya. Some of you may have heard my lecture about collective nature of wilaya. It is also online. It's impossible to be a good Muslim and not be a good member of the community. It's impossible to claim that you love God and then you don't love for the sake of God. It's very important if our students just can learn this, that they love for the sake of God. Then I think everything else will be sorted out. And this is very important quality that we have to emphasize on. I just mentioned one hadith here that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you will never enter heaven unless you are mu'min. And you are not mu'min unless you love each other for the sake of Allah. So the sign of mu'min is not to just love Allah. The sign of mu'min is to love for the sake of Allah. It's much more important than just loving Allah. Another quality that our students should have is that they must be truthful. Truthfulness is the core of taqwa. If someone is learned to be truthful and humble in front of the truth and actually seek the truth, I don't think this person will never go to the wrong direction. And even if it goes to the wrong direction, when Allah does itmamul hujjah, Allah completes the proof for him, he comes back quickly. Again, this has a philosophy behind it. I don't have time, but if you are interested, I can give you some references later. And the other thing is that our students should be taught how to be always conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we have in the Munajat Sha'baniyah, Ilahi alhaqni بنور عزك الأبهج حتى أكون لك عارفا وعن سواك منحرفا ومنك خائفا مراقبا. These things come together if we are aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we are worried not to do anything to displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if we are detaching ourselves from anything that keeps us far from Allah, then I think it's a great achievement. So my idea is that if we have these fundamental values in our mind and plan to achieve them, all other good things would come. I just end with this point. Once we had a discussion in Qom, because there is an organization, huge organization, they are writing and compiling an encyclopedia on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they have different committees. One committee is about the moral character of Rasulullah. And they invited me to, consult. One of the discussions we had there was how to bring all these moral characteristics of Rasulullah into this encyclopedia. So they had some introductory discussions about significance of akhlaq, about, for example, some even philosophical issues about akhlaq. Then they had some list of the characteristics. I made a point. I don't know how much you agree with me. I said it's not very accurate if we bring all these characteristics in the same line, in the same order. I think some of these characteristics emerge from an underlying character. In other words, I said I don't think Rasulullah struggled to achieve, for example, generosity. Then he struggled to achieve, for example, how to be kind. He struggled how to avoid hasad and being jealous. So he did different separate things. Then he achieved all these things. I said, in my understanding, Rasulullah had one major quality that brings all these things. And that is he was a servant of Allah. Servitude to God. Servitude to truth. Being humble brings all other good things and removes all the bad things. If you don't fix things from the roots and foundations, then you have always to struggle with different branches and compartments, which I don't mind, but I'm saying that we should not forget the major things. Those things that I mentioned, I think, are some of the major things that we have to take into account. So I hope that if we adopt all these things when it comes to environment, to the harmony that must be there, to the things that teachers should observe, administrators should observe, the programs, the methods, and also this approach, this scholarly approach to akhlaq, then inshallah we should have opportunity for people, fertile opportunity for people who want to be spiritual. But you cannot guarantee, again, that everything will be okay. But I think this would be very fertile and very productive ground for people to be spiritual, inshallah. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.